This Mexican model tried to tell us what the elites were doing, but no one listened. In 2009, Mexican model Gabriela Rico Jimenez was attending a high-profile party in Monterrey, Mexico, allegedly tied to an elite model agency. Now, this party wasn't just any kind of party. It was said to have powerful businessmen, politicians, and possibly organized crime figures. Days later, Gabriela appeared in a now viral video outside of a luxury hotel in Monterrey. She seemed distressed and scared of something maybe she wasn't supposed to see. Gabriela mentioned global elites, satanic rituals, and human sacrifices that had to do with children. She even starts dropping names like the royal family, Carlos Slim, and George Bush. Gabriela desperately wanted someone to believe her, but not much longer, police rushed in and dragged her away. After this day, Gabriela was never seen again, and no one knows what happened to her. How can a famous model all of a sudden disappear from the face of the earth and no one know what happened to her? Many people believe she's in hiding, being held captive, or maybe she was deleted from Earth. She tried to warn us and most likely got silenced because of it.
A 13-year-old girl disappears, and somehow the two people that are closest to her respond like it's any other day. Her name was Haley Dunn, and the more you learn about this case, the harder it is to understand how justice still has not been served. After Christmas in 2010, Haley was at home in Colorado City, Texas with her mom's boyfriend, Sean Atkins. Sean told police that Haley was walking to her dad's and into a friend's house for a sleepover that night, but when investigators checked in with that friend, she said she wasn't expecting Haley at all, and her dad hadn't seen her either. The next day, her mother, Billie Jean Dunn, finally reported Haley missing, but almost immediately things started unraveling, and not in a good way. Sean denied 2 polygraph tests before basically being forced to sit for a third. And during that final one, he told police that Haley would be found in Scurry County. And when they asked who should they focus on, he said, me and Haley's mom. But Billie Jean did not exactly help her case either. Her first polygraph had to be stopped because she was under the influence, and the second, she literally walked out refusing to answer anything. But then there are the actions they did after Haley's disappearance. The very same day Haley disappeared, Sean and Billie Jean reportedly took out cash and bought a lot of substances. And just a few days later, while Haley is still missing, they threw a New Year's Eve party. Billie Jean claimed it wasn't a party, but it still didn't sit right with people who were actually paying attention. As police dug deeper and deeper, the discoveries became harder to stomach. Inside their home, investigators found a box filled with documents about serial killers, violent crimes, and disturbing cases involving children, including images of CP. But then came something even worse. Sean compared the act of killing a deer to killing a child. And the thing is, Sean loved to hunt. His favorite part was dismembering a deer with a chainsaw while it was still alive. And there was also a specific moment that just stayed with Haley's family. Her brother David was allegedly forced out of the house by Sean earlier that day, and when he came home, he found the front door locked. So he climbed through a window, and when he entered the house, he allegedly saw Sean just standing there, and right next to him on the wall was blood splatters. But no arrests were ever made. It wasn't until 2013, 2 years after Haley's disappearance, that her remains were found near a lake. A man that was nearby had come across a skull, a femur, a tooth, and a pair of blue sweatpants, the same kind that Haley was wearing that same day. But still, there were no charges filed yet. 8 more years passed before anything happened until 2021. Sean Atkins was finally arrested and charged with Haley's murder. The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma to the head. And in 2023, just 2 years after his arrest, those same charges were dropped. Not because Sean was cleared, but because the prosecution needed more evidence to move forward. So now, after all this time, a highly potential is free, and that is Sean Atkins. But here's the part that really leaves people shaken up. When Sean was first questioned back in 2011, he said that Haley's remains would be found in Scurry County. And 3 years later, that is exactly where they found her body. I can't stress this enough. Say her name, keep her story alive, because Haley deserved to grow up, and instead her is out there living freely. You guys, I get too emotionally invested in these. Thank you so much to a family member of hers for reaching out and telling me her story. As always, thank you guys so much for being here and allowing me to raise awareness for all of these cases and families. I hope I see you in my next video. Mwah, group hug.
He reported his mother missing to the police, but then accidentally showed them this photo. This is him holding her decapitated head. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Tanya Bird. 45-year-old Tanya Bird was working as a home health aide within her community in the Bronx, New York. Her friends would describe her as a very happy, upbeat, outgoing woman. She was kind and funny and generous and a brilliant mother. Tanya was a mother of 2. Her older son was 23-year-old Basit McLean, and her younger son was 10-year-old Nazia. When Basid was still relatively young, Tanya did actually put him into foster care. She was an active addict at the time and didn't feel like she was in a position to be raising a young child, so she did what she thought was the right thing for her son at the time. By the time he turned 18, Tanya had completely turned her life around. She was clean, she was sober, and she was living a normal, happy life, and when Basid turned up at her door, she welcomed him back in with open arms, a decision that she would soon come to regret. Basid hated his mother. He resented her and he harboured a massive amount of rage towards her for putting him into foster care in the first place, and this was very apparent. Tanya would confide in some of her friends that she was terrified of her son. He came back to live with her when he was 18, and by the time he was in his 20s, early 20s, Tanya was encouraging him, wanting him to go out and find a job and make his own money, not spending hers all the time, and maybe even look for his own place, which Basid took bad. He thought that this was his mother once again trying to get rid of him, which wasn't the case. He would bring trouble to his mother's apartment on Morrisania. On one occasion, he attacked 2 police officers with a knife, which saw him go on probation. He was reportedly schizophrenic and had bipolar disorder, but completely refused to take any of his medication, and Tanya started to suspect that he was abusing her younger son. Nazia required a lot more of Tanya's attention, which is something that Basid was incredibly jealous about. That was because Nazia had Down syndrome, and Tanya started to notice that unexpected marks and bruises and abrasions were showing up all over Nazia's body. In the late hours of the 25th of February 2013, Basid and Tanya are in the middle of a fiery argument. This could have been an argument about many things: Basid not taking his medication, him once again sponging off his mum wanting more money, or maybe Tanya was criticising his own parenting skills. At this moment in time, he is the father to a pretty much newborn baby boy. During this argument, at the height of it, completely consumed in anger, Basid would take a knife and stabbed Tanya in the neck, killing her before decapitating her head and then taking pictures with it. He would eventually leave the apartment on Morrisania and ended up on a train where he met 26-year-old William Harris. Up until this very moment, I believe that the men were complete strangers. Basid showed William the photo that he had taken with Tanya's head and enlisted his help in furthering dismembering and then disposing of his mother's body, which William accepted. Any other normal person would be horrified and contact the police, but not this man. He wanted to help. The 2 men would go to a hardware shop where they picked up a saw and then headed back to the apartment. Tanya would be completely drained of her blood in the bathroom before being extensively dismembered. Her remains would be separated and stuffed into, I think it was 3 black bin bags, and these were scattered all around the Bronx. It's believed that they used a stolen trolley to transport the remains. At around about 4 a.m, it is now the 26th of February, a man is out walking his dog when his dog starts getting excited and signalling towards this black bag. The man thought that it was probably just food, and so he went over to investigate, and that is when he saw a human leg inside of the black bin bag. He was horrified and terrified, so straight away he called 911. Later on that morning, Basid would actually go into the police station and reported his mother missing. He told the person that he was given the report to that Tanya had spent the last couple of days with her boyfriend. She had left over 24 hours before, and since then Basid hadn't heard from her and he hadn't managed to get in touch with her. He made the report and then headed back home. Meanwhile, more bags of remains were being discovered. Notably, one of the remains was another human leg that had been wrapped up inside of a shower curtain. Now, the officers are thinking, we have all of these remains, we have just had a missing persons report, so these 2 must be connected, so off they went to Morrisania to investigate. Upon their arrival, as soon as Basid opened the door, the smell of bleach whacked the officers in the face. It was so distinct and just thick in the air. The apartment was absolutely spotless, and they noticed that a shower curtain was missing. The officers asked Basid to provide them with a photo of of his mother Tanya, and so he whipped out his phone and he's scrolling through his camera roll, showing some beautiful pictures of his mother, up until he scrolls one too far, showing the officers this photo, him pulling this face while holding up and posing with Tanya's decapitated head. Of course, he was immediately arrested. He was taken to the station where during an interview he admitted what he'd done and even told the investigator, quote, "If you can kill somebody, you should be able to cut them up too. If you can't do that, you don't have the stomach to cut them up, then you're a coward." Throughout his court proceedings, Basid would show up to the courtroom wearing either literal bin bags or these sort of white suits because he kept on wetting himself. Now, he was gunning for an insanity plea, so we don't know if this is him trying to play up to the insanity. He would also have to wear gloves that sort of looked like oven mitts because when he wasn't wearing them, he would just claw at himself. Despite the best efforts of the defense team, Basid McLean would be found guilty of the second-degree murder of his mother, Tanya Bird. He was handed a sentence of 25 years to life to serve. William Harris was also imprisoned for his part in the dismemberment of Tanya's body. As I mentioned earlier, Basid was a father, and horrifyingly, only 4 years after he horrifically murdered his own mother, his baby mom would murder his son. Comment down below and let me know if you want me to cover that case.
After asking campus and Salt Lake City police for help over 20 times, this student was told that there was nothing they could do. Lauren McCluskey was 21 years old and she was a senior at the University of Utah. She was a Division I track and field athlete, competing in hurdles and sprints, and she was known by her teammates to be a driven, disciplined, and deeply kind. She grew up in Pullman, Washington, in a tight-knit family that emphasized education, accountability, and doing the right thing. Lauren was described as someone who would follow rules, trusted authority, and she believed that if you asked for help the right way, you would receive it. Lauren wasn't reckless, she wasn't naive, she was very careful, and when something wasn't right, she would speak up. And that's what makes this case so devastating because Lauren did everything that she was supposed to do. In the fall of 2018, Lauren met a guy at a bar in the downtown area of Utah. He told her that he was a college student in his early 20s, someone close to her age. At the time, Lauren had no reason to suspect otherwise. But soon after, she started to notice some red flags like changing names, inconsistent stories, and things that didn't add up. Trusting her instincts, Lauren started looking into him on her own. And that's when she learned the truth. He wasn't in his early 20s, he was 37 years old, and his name was Melvin Rowland. He had lied about his identity, his age, and his background. And most disturbing of all, Lauren discovered that he was a registered sex offender with a violent criminal history. She had no way of knowing this when she first met him, but as soon as she found out, she quickly ended the relationship and tried to move on. But that's when everything escalated. After Lauren ended the relationship, Melvin would not stop messaging her. He began harassing and blackmailing her and told her that he would release explicit photos of her unless she gave him money. The messages became more frequent, more aggressive, and more alarming. At this point, Lauren was really scared and she did exactly what she was supposed to do. She went to campus police and Salt Lake City police and showed them the messages, the threats, and the proof. Over the next few days, Lauren contacted police over 20 times and told them that she felt unsafe and she was scared what might happen. Lauren trusted that the police would step in if things got worse, but they didn't. While Lauren was repeatedly asking police for protection, one of the officers asked her if he could look at those explicit photos of her as part of the ongoing investigation. Instead of treating that evidence with professionalism, that officer showed his colleagues those photos and started to make inappropriate remarks about her photos. This wasn't just a failure to protect Lauren, this was a violation of her dignity, and she had no idea that this happened. While Lauren kept reporting these threats, police failed to tell her that Melvin was on parole and he had prior violent convictions. At one point, officers had enough information to request a warrant, but they didn't. On the night of October 22nd of 2018, Lauren was walking back to her dorm. She had no idea that Melvin had been waiting outside of her dorm for hours. Lauren was on the phone with her mother when Melvin approached her. He dragged her across the parking lot and fatally shot her 7 times. Lauren's mother was still on the phone for all of it. Lauren was later found behind a vehicle near the trunk area. Melvin fled the scene and later took his own life, ending any chance for Lauren's family to get any kind of answers or justice in court. But Lauren's family demanded answers. They wanted to know why campus police did nothing to help Lauren, why officers didn't tell her that Melvin was on parole and dangerous, and opportunities to intervene were missed again and again. In 2020, the University of Utah admitted responsibility and issued a formal apology, and Lauren's family were granted a $13.5 million settlement. Lauren McCluskey did everything right. She asked for help over and over again, but the system failed her.
There's just something about when a mother murders her own baby that makes cases like this that much more devastating. This poor young boy didn't stand a chance. His own father would murder his mother and then took photos posing with her decapitated head. And only 4 years after he was incarcerated, this innocent little boy would make a mistake and was beaten to death for it. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of Zamia Coombs. In 2013, Zara Coombs and Basid McLean would welcome their son Zamia Coombs into the world. When Zamia was only 3 months, his father Basid would be sent to prison for a pretty much lifelong sentence after he murdered and then dismembered his own mother. If you're interested in hearing more about that case, I have already posted it. It is the case before this one on my profile. Zamia was left in the custody of Zara, who found herself a new man. They got into a relationship and soon started having their own children. They would have another 2. The family all lived together in an apartment in Brooklyn, New York, which was described as disgusting. The family apparently lived in squalor, and the basement floor apartment was rat infested. On the 25th of January 2017, 26-year-old Zara would be left at home alone with all 3 of the children while her boyfriend went out to work. This was 4-year-old Zamia and then a 1-year-old and a 1-month-old. At some point during the day, Zamia would go up to his mum complaining that he was hungry and asking for food, but Zara paid him no attention. She shooed him away, ignoring him and refusing to get him something to eat. But Zamia couldn't wait. He was extremely hungry, and so he made his way into the kitchen, opened up the fridge and started rummaging around to see what he could have to eat. It was then that he accidentally knocked some eggs, causing them to fall out of the fridge, crashing to the floor, breaking. Upon hearing this, Zara stormed into the kitchen and was irate at Zamia for creating such a mess and wasting food. She would pick up the first thing in her line of vision, which was a heavy, solid wooden broomstick, and she proceeded to beat her 4-year-old son with it. She would beat Zamia with this broomstick until he fell unconscious and then left him on the kitchen floor while she went to breastfeed her 1-month-old baby. After some time passed, Zara went to check on Zamia and she would find that he was still lay unresponsive on the kitchen floor. Now, instead of calling 911 for help or calling anyone for help or even attempting any sort of CPR, she instead got a big plastic Tupperware box, filled that up with water and then lay Zamia in the box and left him in it. Hours later, shortly before 9 p.m, when Zara's boyfriend returned home, he would see the condition that Zamia was in and immediately called 911. Officers would race to the apartment where they attempted CPR on Zamia. It was said that Zara stood on the sidelines watching, showing absolutely no emotion. 4-year-old Zamia would die in the hospital hours later. Over 60 bruises were discovered all across his little body. Some of them were old, some of them were fresh, and over 30 of them were to his head and his neck. His cause of death was determined to have been from multiple blunt impact injuries alongside a brain injury. During interviews with the police, Zara would tell them that she was really struggling and overwhelmed with all 3 of the children, that alongside her suffering from postnatal depression. Despite this, she was charged with the 2nd-degree murder for her son Zamia Coombs and was handed a 17-year prison sentence.
This teenage girl wanted to unalive more people than any serial killer in history. Not clickbait, a whole plan was ready. She picked a fake name, made a fake Tinder, and started luring men one by one. Her real name is Sarah, but online they called her Cherry Domina. And if that name sounds like some kind of twisted adult villain, that is exactly what she was going for. Born in 2002, she grew up pretty normal at first. She had friends, good grades, even had a pet bunny that she loved like a sibling. But when she hit her teens, something changed. She started skipping school, doing drugs, fighting classmates, throwing parties, but when she hit 16, it gets even even more weird. She starts bragging to everyone about how she's selling her body to older men and making a lot of money from it. And around the same time, she starts messing with really hard substances and even gets arrested for possession. But did that snap her out of it? Did she have some life-changing epiphany? Nope, not at all. There was one day her mom walked into Sarah's room and found a tied rope hanging from her closet. Like, imagine being a parent and seeing that. At that point, her parents could not handle it anymore, and so they checked her into a psychiatric facility hoping for some help. But even there, she was wild. She literally tried to convince another patient to unalive themselves. Like, what? That is not troubled teenager anymore. That is just straight up disturbing. Thankfully, it didn't work, but still. She had stayed there for a while, but by the time she hit 17, she was finally let out. And this is where things went completely off the rails, if you didn't already think she was off the rails. Because after she got out, Sarah became obsessed with serial killers. Like, she starts idolizing Ted Bundy, Jack the Ripper, Richard Ramirez, reading all their crimes in detail like it's some damn novel, and she didn't just study them, she fantasized about becoming one. Around the same time, she gets her very first boyfriend. His name's Leon, and honestly, he is a mess too. But they were madly in love, like a toxic soulmate kind of love. And their relationship was violent, and I don't mean just arguments and stuff, I mean bedroom violence. Sarah would literally beg him to hurt her, like bruises, cuts, torture. She wanted it all. And at first, Leon went along with it for like 2 years or so, but the more intense she wanted it, the more he started pulling back. Because now he's seeing all these cuts and bruises on her body, and he's like, yo, this is not a kink, this is something else. So he broke up with her, and that broke her. She felt rejected and betrayed, spiraling into this huge rage, like not just at him, but at every single man alive. She started spreading these rumors that Leon had choked her, abused her, S8'd her, even leaked her nudes online. Obviously none of it was true. She made it all up, all because she wanted her revenge. And then she sent her friends this message: the most famous serial killer in the world killed 250 people. I'm gonna beat that. And she was not joking. A plan was set in motion. She managed to obtain a 12-inch camping knife. She was even googling things like, how long does it take someone to pass away if you in the neck? She knew exactly what she wanted and how she was going to get it, because she realized, hey, I'm pretty and men will do whatever I say. So she turns to dating apps like Tinder and Bumble and created multiple fake accounts under the name Cherry Domina. She claimed to be 19, a submissive virgin, and into BDSM. And if you don't know what that is, good. By day 3, she had 224 men in her DMs. It was just creepy older men eating up every single word. She would flirt with them, tease with them, and say things like, I'll do anything you want. I like being tied up. I want you to take control. One man literally asked if he could be her slave. It was that disgusting. And that's how on May 1st, she lured her first victim. His name was Zaid. He wasn't even looking for a hookup. He was looking for a real girlfriend. He picks her up for the first day, and on the way, she tells him, hey, can you pull over really quickly? She reaches for the knife that she had been hiding. She turns to him, and in the neck. Blood starts spraying everywhere, and he starts fighting back, and she wasn't exactly prepared for that. She thought one quick stab and boom, they're gone, but Zaid was alive and kicking. She panics, bolts out of the car, covered in blood and mud, running down the street like it's a horror movie. And she's literally screaming, I'm a murderer! I'm a murderer! All the meanwhile, someone is seeing all of this in action. They call 911, and 37 minutes later, Sarah is in handcuffs. The cops even asked her, why do you look like a walking crime scene? And she goes, I just watched someone bleed to death. Zaid was rushed to the hospital, but sadly, he fell into a coma and ended up passing away. So now it's not just attempted murder, she's facing real murder charges. But Sarah did not care. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She didn't show any remorse. And while in prison, she asked her mom, hey, can you go and unalive Leon for me? Of course she said no, but the nerve to even ask. When they asked if she regretted what she did, her answer was, I'm just mad I got caught too early. Not that she unalived someone, just the fact that she couldn't do more. She was later declared mentally ill and sentenced to 12 years in the psychiatric facility, which means that she could be out by age 31, which is not that far off. And honestly, I do not think that people like that can change, but who knows? Either way, be careful who you trust, because the next time you're swiping on Tinder, it might not be love, it might be Cherry Domina.
Imagine going to a lover's lane late at night with your partner on a remote stretch of road and seeing this guy walk up to your car window. In 1946, that's exactly what couples in Texarkana, Texas would experience, and 5 of them wouldn't live to tell the tale. Over a period of 10 weeks, an unidentified serial killer known only as the Phantom Killer terrorized this small community. He would target couples who were parked on remote stretches of road, otherwise known as lovers' lanes. He would strike late at night, only on weekends when the couples were unsuspecting, and he would go on to brutally murder 5 people and attack even more. Then he vanished off the face of the earth, living up to his name, the Phantom. Where he went and if he went on to continue killing even more people, no one knows. But this case went on to inspire this creepy movie called The Town That Dreaded Sundown. I just watched this and it made me go down a rabbit hole with the real case. What I found is incredibly disturbing, and since this is still unsolved, let's talk about it. So, like I said, the story begins in February of 1946 in the Texarkana region. So you have twin cities at the border of Miller County, Arkansas, and Bowie County, Texas. These communities were really small and really safe, and they were not prepared for what was to come. Between February 22nd and May 3rd of 1946, someone who wore this type of mask started killing innocent couples. The murders would usually take place on isolated stretches of road where no one was around to see, but the last victim was killed in their remote 500-acre farmhouse. What started it all was the violent attack on 25-year-old Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend, 19-year-old Mary Larry. This took place on February 22nd, 1946. Jimmy and Mary were having a really amazing date night and had just finished watching a movie together. To end the night, they decided to park on a secluded road just outside of Texarkana to have some alone time. And although this was a secluded road, you could easily see where the last line of houses in the neighborhood ended. So it wasn't like super far outside of town or anything like that. After only 10 minutes of being parked, a man wearing a white mask that resembled a pillowcase with eye holes cut out walked up to Jimmy's car window. The man lit up the car with a really bright flashlight and said, quote, "I don't want to kill you, fellow, so do what I say." End quote. After he did, the man struck him in the head with a gun 2 times, and this was with so much force that it knocked Jimmy out. Now, Mary was watching this all happen, and she was terrified. And she said that Jimmy was being hit so hard that it sounded like he was shot. What she didn't know was that horrible sound that she was hearing was actually his skull fracturing. Mary begged the masked man to let them go, saying they didn't have any money, and she even showed him their wallets, but he knocked her down onto the ground. But what he said next is chilling, because he told her to stand up and start running. Confused, she did exactly that. So she started sprinting up the road and eventually came across an old car that was parked and abandoned. Since it was empty, she tried to get in, but just as she was about to, the masked man appeared directly behind her. I mean, this was a scene straight up out of a horror movie. The man said, quote, "Why are you running?" End quote, which is insanely creepy. And Mary said, "Because you told me to." The man called her a liar and again knocked her down onto the ground. He then SA'd her with the barrel of his gun, but somehow during this, she got away and ran half a mile to a nearby house. Mary was able to wake up the homeowners, who then called the police. But while this was happening, Jimmy also woke up, and he was still near their car where the attack first happened. Bloody and barely conscious, he was able to flag down a passing car, who then also called the police. Within 30 minutes, authorities were at the crime scene, but the masked man was long gone. They did a quick search, but he literally vanished into thin air. Both Jimmy and Mary were treated at the hospital and survived this horrifying attack, and it was then that they gave the description of their attacker to the police. Their descriptions varied a little bit, but overall, it was this. The man was around 6 feet tall and had been wearing a terrifying mask. Mary said she could see under his mask a little bit around the eyes and thought that he could have been a light-skinned African American, but Jimmy thought the man could have just been a white man with a tan. He wasn't 100% sure because he was blinded by the flashlight and then knocked unconscious though. Either way, their description was so creepy. I mean, back then, stuff like this didn't happen in Texarkana. It was incredibly safe, and everyone always left their doors unlocked, so it was hard for the police to believe that this wasn't targeted or isolated. In fact, they actually kind of victim blamed Jimmy and Mary, saying they must know who attacked them. They even accused them of knowing who did it and covering for them, which is crazy and so disrespectful. The couple denied this, but police refused to believe this would escalate into something more. But boy, were they wrong, because on March 23rd, 1946, this man would strike again, only this time it would be deadly. That night, 29-year-old Richard Griffin and his girlfriend of only 6 weeks, 17-year-old Pauline Moore, were out on a date. Again, they were on an isolated road, aka Lover's Lane. They should have been home relatively soon, but they never came back. The next morning, someone driving down US Highway 67 in Bowie County saw a car parked about 100 yards off the road. It seemed a little weird that it would be parked in this location, so the motorist pulled over and walked up to the car. What they discovered was gruesome. There in between the front seats was Richard, very clearly dead. He was shot twice in the back of the head, and he was positioned after the fact on his knees with his head resting on his crossed hands, and his pockets had been turned inside out. In the back seat was Polly, face down and sprawled out. She too had been shot in the back of the head. So needless to say, he notified authorities, and when they inspected the scene, they quickly learned that Polly had been positioned after death too. Just outside of the car in the dirt and grass was a large blood stain. Like, the earth in that location was soaked in blood. And right next to that was a bloody blanket. Evidence suggested that Polly was killed outside of the car on this blanket and then moved inside the car. And other evidence showed that Richard was shot inside the car. What's really scary is how bloody the scene was. Like, blood was dripping outside of the car through the front door. But as police continued to examine the scene, they found their first and honestly only real clue: a .32 caliber cartridge that had been ejected from a pistol. I know this took place in 1946, so this was a different time back then, but neither of these victims were examined by a pathologist, which has led to a lot of speculation. Some reports say that Polly was SA'd, while others deny this, so I'm honestly not sure. Police were quick to say that the first attacks on Jimmy and Mary were an isolated incident, but now with these new killings under eerily similar circumstances, it was getting harder to ignore what could be happening. But still, they tried saying that this was an isolated incident and urged the public not to worry. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and on April 14th, 1946, the killer would strike once again. At around 1:30 that morning, 16-year-old Paul Martin picked up his friend, 15-year-old Betty Jo Booker, from a musical performance. She was an amazing saxophone player, and Paul was really popular at their school in Texarkana. Paul and Betty Jo should have gone straight home, but something happened on the way, and they too never made it back. At around 6:30 later that morning, a grim discovery confirmed the worst. Paul was dead. His body was found laying on its left side near North Park Road, and his blood was found on the other side of the street by a fence. It looked as though he had been dragged across the street, and it was just a really bloody scene. He had been shot 4 times, once through the nose, once through his ribs from behind, once in his right hand, and finally through the back of his neck. He had severe defensive wounds all over his body, meaning he put up one hell of a fight against his killer. Sadly, 5 hours later, Betty Jo would be found dead as well. Her body was found about 2 miles from Paul's, behind a tree and on her back. What's really eerie is that just like Richard, she too had been posed after death. Her right hand was put in her buttoned up coat pocket. She had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the face, and she too had major defensive wounds on her body. This makes me so sad because they were literal babies, 15 and 16 years old. And to experience something like this is just awful. But based on evidence found at the scene, the weapon that was used was the same weapon that was used in the first double murder, a .32 semi-automatic Colt pistol. Paul's car would eventually be found 3 miles away, parked outside of Spring Lake Park with the keys still in the ignition. So it seems clear that whoever killed these teens then drove Paul's car to this park and then left it there. Just like in the other 2 cases, the killer was long gone at this point. People who knew Paul and Betty Jo all said that they were incredibly kind and had no enemies. So this left behind one eerie explanation: that this was completely random, and whoever was doing this was targeting young couples late at night. Even though police still tried saying that this was isolated and not to worry, everyone in the community began to panic. I mean, now you have 2 church-going teenagers killed in such a violent way. It was pretty much known that this was not going to stop. And unfortunately, the killings would only continue. On May 3rd, 1946, the 5th and final person would be killed. That night, 37-year-old Virgil Stark and his wife Katie were at home on their isolated 500-acre farm. This was about 10 miles northeast of Texarkana. Just before 9 p.m., Virgil was sitting in his armchair reading the newspaper when he was shot twice in the back of his head from a closed window. This was obviously super loud because it shattered the glass, so Katie crept downstairs and saw Virgil stand up. I'm assuming his body was in shock, which didn't last long, and then he slumped back down into his chair. When she realized he was dead, she ran to her crank telephone to call 911, but it only rang twice before she too was shot twice in the face from the same window. Katie fell to the ground, but was somehow still alive, so she tried to crawl to her bedroom to get her own gun, but she was blinded by her blood. She could hear the killer in the back of her house, so she found the strength to get up and run barefoot out the front door and to the house across the street street where her sister and brother-in-law lived, but unfortunately, nobody was home. So she ran for what seemed like forever to her next-door neighbor's house, which wasn't close because they literally lived in the middle of nowhere. She managed to bust through the front door and yell, quote, "Virgil's dead," end quote, before collapsing. Her sweet neighbor took action immediately and shot her rifle in the air to notify their other neighbor that something was wrong. That neighbor brought her car, and together they took Katie to the hospital where she miraculously survived. Somehow, even with this evidence, police had their doubts about what was going on. In their minds, they could now 100% say that there was a serial killer operating in the area. I mean, to them, going from attacking couples in their car to then attacking them on their isolated farm was a big jump. And it's also been reported that this time it was a different weapon that was used. Now it was a .22, not a .32 caliber pistol. But now, with 5 people dead and killed all in the same manner, Mary Leary, who was the first victim attacked by this killer, came back to Texarkana. She had left town after the police didn't believe her, but she knew deep down that if police didn't catch this guy, that he was going to kill someone. Turns out, she was right. Mary came back to help link all of their cases together and to try and catch this killer. But still, police insisted that she knew who attacked her and that it wasn't connected. But 8 days after Virgil's murder, they suddenly changed their minds. Now, it was official. Whoever attacked Mary and Jimmy was the same person who went on a killing spree. Every 3 weeks on the dot, the killer would strike again, which meant authorities had no time to waste. This led to a massive investigation involving several different agencies, including the FBI. Together, they interviewed over 400 people and possible suspects, but this led them nowhere. Police went on to say, quote, "This killer is the luckiest person I have ever known. No one sees him, no one hears him in time, and no one can identify him in any way." End quote. Because of how random the killings were and how well the killer was able to get away, he became known as the Phantom Killer. And he definitely lived up to his name because no matter what police did, they could not catch him. They blocked off roads and highways, and at any given point in time, 47 police officers were working on the case. Random people driving through the area would be stopped and questioned. And one of the craziest things that I've ever heard about in any true crime case was that police in Texarkana would recruit real teenagers to sit as decoys in hopes of catching the Phantom Killer. Like, they would have these teens sit in parked cars at night while officers watched nearby trying to lure this killer in. That is insane to me and so dangerous. But this also never worked. And to this day, the Phantom Killer has never been caught. Authorities believe that the killer was only motivated by dark sexual desires and not robbery because no money was ever taken. Since this killer was never caught, everyone in town was terrified. Curfews were set for local businesses because police didn't want people on the streets at nightfall, and hysteria only continued to grow with newspapers publishing articles saying things like, quote, "The Phantom Killer may strike again at any given moment, and any one of us could be next." End quote. Like I said, Texarkana was usually a safe place, but after the murders, residents would lock their doors, they would nail sheets to windows, or even nail windows down completely. Gun and lock sales skyrocketed, and Texarkana actually became unsafe because of how scared its residents were. People would arm themselves with guns they didn't know how to use, and homeowners were so nervous that they would shoot at anyone walking by their house, even at police. This fear even spread into neighboring cities. It was absolutely intense. Residents started blaming each other, and some teenagers would band together and actually try to hunt this killer down. They would couple up and park on isolated roads, and one night, a police officer was patrolling one of these roads and saw one of their cars parked off to the side. Inside were 2 teens. He quickly introduced himself as a cop, to which the girl said, quote, "It's a good thing you told me who you are." End quote. And she raised a gun that had been pointed at him the entire time. Teenagers were doing this so much that police had to make a public statement telling them to stop. They said, quote, "Don't do this. It's a good way to get killed." End quote. Although many people tried to lure this killer in, it never worked. The identity of the Phantom Killer remains a mystery to this day, but there have been a couple of theories about who could have been responsible. The only major suspect in this case was a 29-year-old car thief named Ewell Swinney. There isn't a lot of evidence linking him, it's mainly circumstantial. But essentially, Ewell and his wife Peggy were known for stealing cars, and the very last time they got busted, Peggy confessed to police that Ewell was the Phantom Killer. She gave them some evidence that could actually be verified, but she later recanted all of her statements. It was very clear that she was terrified of him and refused to testify against him. But police did find some other circumstantial evidence that is kind of damning. For one, police found a work shirt in Ewell's bedroom with a mark on it that said Stark, which was the Phantom Killer's final victim's last name, Virgil Stark. What's interesting is that police found evidence in the front pocket of this shirt that matched back to Virgil's welding shop. Ewell had also recently sold a .32 automatic pistol, which was the same type of weapon that was used in the murders. And lastly, Peggy somehow knew exactly where Betty Jo entered the woods, where she would eventually be killed. Although this evidence seems kind of convincing, Ewell was never charged in connection to the Texarkana Moonlight murders. He was convicted on other unrelated car theft charges in which he received a long sentence, but never for the murders, which is crazy. But I guess there's just not enough that perfectly lines up that proves without a doubt that he did it. Over the years, there have been many other potential suspects, but the only one that held some weight outside of Ewell was a man named Earl McSpadden. Not long after the last murder, Earl's body was found on the Kansas City Southern Railway tracks, about 16 miles north of Texarkana. His left arm and leg had been severed by a train, but investigators discovered that he'd been dead long before being placed on the tracks. Because of the timing of this, and the fact that the Phantom Killer mysteriously stopped killing after this, some people suspect that Earl was the real killer. Others think that he could have been the Phantom Killer's sixth victim, but to this day, we just don't know. It is terrifying to me how a killer can go a long time violently killing people, leave behind no evidence, and then somehow vanish into thin air. Like, do they stop killing? Or do they just go somewhere else and continue killing? I don't know, but this guy's mask is legit nightmare fuel, and I can't imagine seeing this in real life at night. Also, this movie is scary and made me have bad dreams, but it's now been 80 years, and the identity of the Phantom Killer and why he did this remains a mystery.
An absolutely horrific serial killer that you have likely never heard of.
Portraying me as being non-human, and their motivation is no separate from the way I treated my victims. I treated them as something less than human, nothing more than a play toy or not a play object. This is what the media has done to me. It's dehumanized me.
We are so close to Halloween, and the entire month of October I've been sharing with you guys the most horrific, terrifying true crime cases I've ever heard of, and I do have to put a content warning on today's video. Bob Berdella is a monster. Bob Berdella grew up in a really religious family. His father was very strict, borderline abusive, but Bob was still desperate for his father's approval. As a child, Bob was an outcast. He was bullied. He didn't really have any friends, but honestly, Bob really looked down on his peers. He was very smart, and he had an inflated ego and definitely saw everyone as below him. When Bob was a teenager, he realized he was gay, which was hard on him because he came from this religious family, so he felt like he had to keep it a secret. And then as soon as he was coming to terms with this, his father randomly had a heart attack and died at only the age of 39. So the approval that he was always desperate to get from his father, he realized that he was never going to get. And if that wasn't hard enough, shortly after his father died, Bob was actually SA'd by one of his older coworkers at his part-time job. Bob was very lonely and in a lot of pain. But Bob found comfort and joy in his favorite movie called The Collector, and this movie definitely altered Bob's brain chemistry. The plot centers around a man who becomes so obsessed with one of his female coworkers that he kidnaps her and holds her captive in hope of her one day falling in love with him. For college, Bob went to art school and out of nowhere starts showing the most disturbing behavior ever. 18-year-old Bob would bring animals into his class and hurt them in the name of art, like he would call it an art project. For one of these projects, Bob brought a duck into his school and boiled it alive in front of his entire class. And then on 2 separate days, Bob brought a chicken and a dog into class, injected them with so much substances until they both passed away. And I guess the third time killing an animal in front of his entire class was the last straw because Bob was expelled. After this, Bob found work. He opened his own company up. He bought a house. He started to show more confidence. You know, people started to like him. He joined the neighborhood watch. At this point, Bob was Out and proud, he started a very serious long-term relationship with another man, but that man ended up breaking up with Bob, which broke his heart, and once again, he was completely alone. So Bob found comfort in the arms of young male S-workers, and Bob really liked them young. They were like teenage boys. And a lot of these young men were extremely vulnerable. Some of them were addicts or really poor or living on the street. So Bob would offer these teenage boys or really young men to come live with him, but of course he would expect some things in return. But Bob still had this fantasy from when he was younger, watching his favorite movie of holding someone captive, having complete control over them until they fell in love with him. Bob, who was in his mid-30s, chooses his first victim, a 19-year-old boy named Jerry Howell, and Bob had actually known Jerry since Jerry was 14 years old. Jerry really looked up to Bob and trusted him. And then one evening in 1984, Bob sedated Jerry by giving him a bunch of substances until Jerry was unconscious. Bob then tied up Jerry in his house and essayed him for hours. Bob was also essaying Jerry with different objects and different foods like carrots. He was also beating Jerry and was continuously giving Jerry substances to keep him unconscious. Bob also had something over Jerry's mouth, and at one point Jerry began to get sick, but he had something over his mouth, so he ended up choking on it and passing away. And Bob was not upset at all that Jerry had just passed away. He was only upset that he had lost his prisoner. And to dispose of Jerry's body, he just put him in trash bags and put him on the side of the road to come be taken by the garbage truck and taken to the landfill. Bob's next victim was 18-year-old Robert Sheldon. He also essayed him and beat him for hours. But at this point, Bob actually realized that he liked to watch people in pain, like causing pain to his victims would get him off. So now all of Bob's victims were being brutally tortured. He would put chemicals or needles in their eyes. He would burn them, break their bones, electrocute them, and much worse. Pretty much anything you could think of to torture someone, Bob was doing it to these young men that trusted him. And the entire thing would be documented in Bob's diary and also with the hundreds of Polaroid photos that he was taking. Most of Bob's victims would succumb to their injuries after being tortured for hours or days, or Bob would suffocate them and all of their bodies would be left out for the trash and taken to the landfill. Bob's third victim was 20-year-old Mark Wallace. Mark was not an S-worker. He actually did gardening for Bob. One day he left for work and he never came home. His fourth and fifth victims were 20-year-old Walter Ferris, who was married and also a father, and 21-year-old Todd Stoops. Both of these young men succumbed to their injuries or from their infections. And Bob was really upset with himself because he wanted his victims to stay alive. He was really disappointed because they were supposed to stay alive so they would fall in love with him. But he felt like he could not stop torturing them because that's what got him excited. All of these young men were passing away within days of him kidnapping them. So when Bob kidnapped 20-year-old Larry Pearson, he was determined to keep him alive, and Larry was being held captive by Bob for months. And Larry was being brutally essayed by Bob every single day for hours, and he would have to pretend like he liked it because the longer that Bob kept Larry, the more he began to trust him. Bob had actually convinced himself that Larry had fallen in love with him. They would watch movies together, they would eat breakfast together, and one day Bob asked Larry to do a certain act on him. So when Larry went down on Bob, Larry bit down as hard as he could, nearly biting off Bob's manhood. Bob immediately rushed himself to the hospital, and I don't know how you're able to explain an injury like that. And unfortunately, the hospital was able to stitch Bob back up. But they told him that he would have to stay at the hospital for a few days. So Bob told the hospital that he had something he had to handle at home and he would be right back. So Bob took a taxi back to his house, and then he went to his house and he did unalive Larry. And then he packed up a few things and then got back in the same taxi that took him to the hospital. So that taxi waited outside for Bob while Bob went in and murdered someone. And then by the time that Bob was back at the hospital, he was there for the next 3 days, the entire time Larry's body was still in Bob's house. Bob's 7th victim was actually the only one that he did not know before kidnapping, and that was 21-year-old Chris Bryson, who was an S worker. Bob picked him up, brought him back home, did the same thing he always did. He would knock him out with substances, tie them up, and then essay them for hours. Bob told Chris to follow the rules and he would not hurt him. He also showed him Polaroid photos that he had taken of his first 6 victims and told Chris that they were all dead because they did not follow the rules. Chris was being brutally essayed by Bob for hours every single day and also with objects, and Bob also attempted to put bleach in Chris's eyes to blind him. But it honestly seemed like Bob was trying to recreate the relationship that he thought he had with his last victim, because even though he did not know Chris, he trusted him within days. And only after imprisoning Chris for 2 days, he convinced himself that Chris had already fallen in love with him. And he actually allowed Chris a lot more privileges that his other victims did not get. And one of these privileges is that Bob would not knock Chris unconscious whenever he would leave the house. Like on April 2nd, 1980, when Bob left the house and did not knock Chris unconscious. And Chris knew that this was his chance. He was able to slip his arms out of the ropes that were used to tie him up, but he was even too scared to leave the room that he was being held captive in. He was too afraid to walk throughout the entire house because he did not know when Bob was going to be coming home. So Chris actually jumped out of a 2-story window, breaking some bone on the way down, but he did not care. He just ran up to the first person he saw, and also, didn't even mention this, Chris is not wearing anything but a dog collar. But luckily, the person that saw him did help him and 911 was called. And when the police got there, Chris was able to show them which house he was being held captive in, told them that a man named Bob had held him captive, and also that there were other victims before him. When Bob was arrested, at first, he was only being charged with the essay of Chris Bryson, but when Bob was in custody, he refused to cooperate or talk to anyone. And when they got a search warrant to his house, it was a terrifying sight. They actually found the skull of 2 of his victims that he had kept as trophies, and also the 400 something Polaroids that he had taken to document the torture and essay of his victims. And some of these Polaroids are available online, but like I always say, you can never unsee something, so just think about that before you go looking up things. When it actually came to charging Bob with murder, it was unclear how many victims he had. All they had were these Polaroids and these 2 skulls because Bob had always put his victims out in the trash and he wasn't talking. So at first, Bob was only going to be charged with 1 murder. They were going for the death penalty, and when it came for him to, plead guilty or not guilty, everyone was expecting him to plead not guilty because he hadn't talked to anyone, he hadn't said a single word, being completely uncooperative. But Bob shocked everyone and he pled guilty because he was afraid of the death penalty and he wanted to make a deal. So Bob made a very full and very detailed confession and was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Obviously, this story made huge news in the media, and behind bars, Bob was really mad. He said that he was being mistreated in the media, claimed that he was a good person who just did some bad things, and Bob actually tried to sue for defamation, claiming that the media had ruined his reputation. It's honestly so disgusting, it's almost funny. Like, you are a monster, you are a terrible human being. And to show what a good guy he was, Bob tried to give all of his belongings and his money to his victim's family. And after only being in prison for 4 years, Bob Berdella had a heart attack and died at the age of 43 years old. If you watched the end of this very long video, thank you so much. Definitely leave all your thoughts with me in the comments. I'm going to be trying to reply to as many comments as I can because I know I've been MIA a couple days. Let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow with yet another crazy video.
What happened to this 3-year-old little boy? He disappeared in the woods. He was gone for 2 full days and came back looking like an entirely different kid. I remember hearing about this case when it happened. I remember seeing this picture all over TikTok, and I remember thinking, what happened to that little boy? Like, something traumatizing had to have happened to him. So I looked it up the other day, and honestly, it just left me with more questions than answers. So let's talk about it. On June 3rd of 2022, a 3-year-old little boy named Riker Webb was at home in Montana with his father. They were outside playing in the front yard. His dad was watching him, playing with him. It was a nice sunny summer day, and the area that they lived in was a small town called Troy. And when I say small, I mean small. It was a very quiet area. The house they lived in was surrounded by woods, a lot of trees, creeks, some rivers. And at one point, when Riker and his dad were playing outside, Riker stopped whatever he was doing, and instead he started playing with rocks. It sounds like he just liked to pick up rocks and look for little bugs underneath, which makes sense. He was a 3-year-old little boy. Riker's distracted playing with the rocks when his dad walks inside just for a few minutes to grab something, leaving Riker outside by himself, well, with the family dog. And he says that he was gone for just a few minutes, but when he came back, Riker was gone. Riker was gone, but the family dog was still out there sitting by himself outside, and according to some reports, the dog was acting a little bit anxious. And the dog being outside by himself is weird to me, because when you think about it, most dogs would have followed their human anywhere, especially a little tiny human. His dad is confused. He starts walking around, yelling out his name, circling the front yard, the backyard, trying to peek into the tree line that bordered their property, but there was nothing. Literally just silence. I guess when he realized that he wasn't going to find him, he walked inside to go and tell Riker's mom what happened. Eventually, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office was called, but here's another weird thing. Well, for one, the call wasn't made until 2 hours after Riker was gone, and it wasn't even his parents that made the phone call. It was a neighbor who came out to see what was going on, and as soon as he heard that this little boy was missing, he called the police. Like, 2 hours, weird in itself, but not calling yourself? Like, a neighbor's calling about your 3-year-old little boy? What do you mean? Officers arrived, and pretty much immediately, full-scale search kicked off to search for Riker. About 50 volunteers were there. Officers were spread out across the woods and backwards, all surrounding the Webb property. They had sniffer dogs, drones, even a helicopter. Everyone was looking out and trying to spread out as much as they could to cover as much ground as possible. The officers also issued a red alert across the county describing Riker's age, what he was wearing, and where he was last seen. And they were holding on to hope because their assumptions were that maybe Riker got curious and wandered off into the woods by himself. And realistically, how far could a 3-year-old little boy walk by himself? However, that being said, the official search for him did not start until over 2 hours into his disappearance, so that obviously was a major setback. 3 hours into the search, what was once a sunny summer day turned into a massive thunderstorm that rolled out of nowhere. Heavy rain, lightning, strong winds, the whole thing. The dogs were sent home, the drones were grounded, the helicopter also had to land. By the time the storm had passed, there were only a few officers still searching on foot, still looking for Riker, but they could not find anything. The search was called off for the night, and it resumed early the following morning. Again, they had volunteers searching through the now muddy woods, and by the way, this area was known to have mountain lions and bears, so it wasn't a safe place for anyone, let alone a toddler. They kept going until they found their first clue. It wasn't much, but it was something, and it was a little pile of rocks that they thought Riker had been carrying, and he dropped, leaving them behind, because remember, right before he disappeared, he was playing with rocks. But still then, the rocks led them to nowhere, and that was the first and only clue they found on the entire first full day of the search. The second day, there was nothing, but by the third morning, after 2 long sleepless nights, the call that everyone had been praying for finally came in. The Lincoln County Sheriff's Department got a call that local residents had found Riker alive. He was found in a random shed about 2.4 miles away from his house across the county line in Sanders County off of a road called Pine Ridge. 2.4 miles. A 3-year-old little boy somehow made it through the Montana wilderness during a thunderstorm, and he was alive. So many questions, like how did a toddler survive alone for 2 full days with no food, no water, no shelter, in weather that adults would struggle in? When officers got to Riker, they had to first of all make sure that it was really him, but it was, and he was right there sitting quietly, a little bit shaken. He was acting shy, a little bit scared, and he didn't say much at first, but eventually once they told him that they were gonna get him back to his parents, he relaxed a little bit, and he was put in an ambulance, which is where this picture was taken, and it truly sends shivers down my spine because the look in his eyes is so concerning. He looks exhausted, he looks scared, he looks like he's holding like 20 years of trauma behind those eyes. The couple that found him said they were walking around near their property when they heard strange noises coming from their shed. They assumed that it was an animal trapped inside, but when they opened the door, there was Riker sitting huddled up in the corner. No one could figure out how he even got inside of the shed because the door was closed, but there he was. Police officers were trying to connect the dots, trying to figure out what happened to Riker. They eventually just landed on the idea that Riker got distracted chasing bugs, wandered into the woods, got lost, and eventually found shed to shelter him from the storm. But I don't know, you guys, does it really make sense? A 3-year-old walking 2.4 miles in a storm through thick trees and mud and rain and surviving 2 nights without food or water. It sounds crazy, and it sounds even crazier when you learn that when he was found, he wasn't even dehydrated. He was okay. Like, did someone give him water? Did someone help him? Did someone put him in that shed? We don't know. I literally have goosebumps because I'm just like, I don't know. Whatever really happened still remains unknown. Riker was returned to his family, and ever since the incident, he has been safe and healthy. He should be around 6 years old now, and the only update that I could find was from when his older brother posted a TikTok a couple of years ago asking him what really happened in the woods, and all Riker was able to say was that he saw a house in the woods and that there was somebody in the house, and that was it. I wanted to make this video because it just makes me feel like weirdly so uneasy. Obviously, so great, amazing, incredible that he was found. I'm so happy that he was found safe and healthy and completely fine. But that is all I have for today. Let me know your thoughts on this because I remember seeing this all over TikTok when it first happened, and I hadn't thought about it in a little while until I did, and I was like, what happened to that kid? Okay, hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This is the disturbing final footage of Lars Mattank. Where is he and what happened to him? I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of the world's most famous missing tourist. Lars Mattank was a 28-year-old man from Germany, and he was as normal as any other man. He had a good bond with his family, he had a great group of friends, he was in a loving relationship, and he was a hard worker working at a nearby power plant. On the 30th of June 2014, Lars and a group of his friends all jumped on a plane and jetted off on their first lads holiday, going to Bulgaria for the week. They stayed in the Golden Sands region of Bulgaria inside of a resort, and all around they had an amazing holiday. They spent time relaxing on the beach, going in and out of the many clubs and bars, getting drunk and having a laugh, and they also made sure to spend some time watching some football. The day before they were scheduled to fly home, the 6th of July, Lars and his friends are all sat inside of a bar watching the football when Lars got into an altercation with another group of men. This is because he supported one team and they supported the other. After this altercation, Lars and his friends left the bar and headed towards a McDonald's, but because he didn't want anything, he decided to wait outside of the restaurant while his friends went inside. I did see it reported that Lars didn't eat very well on this holiday, and when his friends exited the McDonald's, Lars was nowhere to be seen. He would show back up at their hotel room hours later and told his friends the most wild story. He said after they went into McDonald's, a group of Russian men approached him and began attacking him, beating him up. He believed that these Russian men were hired by the men he had been arguing with in that bar. Although this didn't really make any sense, because wouldn't Lars have just got up and went into the McDonald's where his friends were for help if he was being approached by a group of angry men who looked like they were going to do him harm? Maybe the Russian men lured him away to beat him up. And if that was right, where had he been for the last couple of hours? The friends were worried and they told Lars that it would be a good idea to go and see a doctor just to get checked out before they headed home, and so he did. Lars had sustained an injury to his ear/eardrum, and so the doctor that was seeing him prescribed him some medication. He gave him a very commonly used antibiotic. The doctor also advised Lars to not get on the plane and go home that evening because of the change in air pressure when you're flying. This would further damage Lars's already injured ear. Despite his friends offering to wait and stay behind with Lars, he would wave them off, reassuring them that he would be fine. He was only going to stop for another 2 days or so and he would be back home in no time. And so his friends got on the plane back to Germany and left Lars behind. After checking out of the resort that they were in, Lars checked into a budget hotel which was nearby the airport. And it would be from here that his behaviour began to change and became worrying. Throughout the night, he would ring his mum Sandra several times, and on each and every phone call, he was erratic. On one phone call, he expressed to his mum that he was worried that he was being followed by a group of men and that they were going to attack him or even kill him. On another phone call, he demanded that Sandra shut down each and every one of his bank accounts, and in every single phone call, Sandra could hear the fear and distress in her son's voice. CCTV footage that was later recovered from the hotel would show that Lars would pace up and down the corridors for hours on end. Looking visibly scared, he would hide behind corners, he would hide in the lift, and he even left the hotel at one point. He left at around about 1 a.m. for about an hour before returning, and we have no idea where he went. Finally, on the 8th of July, Lars was set to return back home to Germany, Sandra feeling relief when she got a text from her son telling her that he had made it to the airport safely. Once inside, he would have to go and have a quick checkup with the doctor just to make sure that he was fit to fly, which the doctor deemed he was. His ear injury looked okay, but Lars's demeanour was still very strange. He seemed paranoid, his eyes were all over the room, and he was fidgeting. While he was sat in the doctor's office, a construction worker who was doing some work inside of the airport quickly popped his head in, and this triggered Lars, who shot up out of his seat and screamed, quote, "I don't want to die here, I have to get out of here," before racing out of the office, running through the airport and out of the doors, leaving behind all of his luggage, which included his phone, his passport, and all of his money. He would be captured on the cameras hopping over a fence and running into some nearby woodland, and that would be the final 100% certainty sighting of Lars Matank. But what happened to him? Why was his behaviour so off? Was it because of his head injury or because of the medication? Where is he, and is there a chance that he could still be alive out there? Comment down below and let me know what you think.
Do you believe in ghosts? He killed a 13-year-old girl and then said that her spirit haunted him for over 30 years until he confessed. Carrie Jopek was a normal 13-year-old girl. She was creative, talented, outgoing. She had lots of friends. But you know, she was 13, she was a teenage girl, so she was rebelling a little bit at this point, but it wasn't anything serious or anything abnormal. Despite her teenage rebelling phase, she was still very much like a young girl, like a little girl. She was very much a 7th grade girl. The day before Carrie disappeared, she went to the mall with one of her best friends. They bought matching outfits that they both planned to wear to school the following day, March 16th, 1982. But that school day was anything but normal. Only a couple hours into Carrie's school day, Carrie actually got suspended for 3 days. When she was in art class, a boy threw some paint at her and it ruined her brand new outfit. So Carrie got up and she hit the boy in the face and she got suspended for that. Carrie was seen crying after this, saying that she was dreading to go home because she was afraid of getting in trouble. The school called Carrie's mom to tell her that, you know, her daughter had gotten in trouble, she had been suspended, asked if it was okay if Carrie walked back home from school, or if she would rather come pick her daughter up. And her mother said it was okay for Carrie to walk home because it was just around the corner from the school to Carrie's house. It was only like 2 blocks. But the 13-year-old Carrie never made it home. At first, her mother thought that maybe her daughter was just stalling, coming home because she was afraid of getting in trouble. But as the hours passed and the hours passed, she started to get really worried. Her mother called all of her friends to see if her daughter was over at any of their houses. She started to search the neighborhood. Eventually, she even went door to door asking if anyone had seen her daughter. But when there were no signs of her 13-year-old daughter, Carrie Jopek was reported missing. Like many missing children in the 80s, investigators thought that maybe Carrie had just run away. Maybe she had an older boyfriend no one knew about. Or maybe she was just afraid of getting in trouble and that's why she didn't come home and she would just be home later. Of course, they did investigate a little bit. They talked to Carrie's biological father, they talked to Carrie's stepfather, they talked to her friends, her teachers, but investigators only really had one suspect, and that was Carrie's best friend's older brother, a 17-year-old boy named John Mant. John Mant was older than Carrie. He was 17 years old. He was already in high school. He already had a criminal record. You know, he had gone in trouble for some petty thefts. He was definitely seen as a troublemaker. Reportedly, he already made like romantic passes at Carrie, and he only lived right across the street from her. And investigators heard rumors that the day that Carrie disappeared, John Mant actually skipped school with like a group of other older kids, and they threw like a daytime party at John Mant's house. And there were rumors that Carrie was actually at that party, and it was like the last place that she was ever seen alive at. But investigators didn't have any proof that Carrie was at this party. It was all just rumors. So they brought the 17-year-old John Mant in for questioning. He denied any involvement. He lawyered up pretty fast. And since they didn't have any evidence against him, they just let him go. And then very quickly after this, the disappearance of Carrie just went cold. It really went nowhere fast. They had no leads. The case definitely just went cold, and it was like that for nearly 2 years until remains were found by a contractor that was hired to do some work on the backyard of one of Carrie's neighbors. That contractor said that the area smelled terrible, and they only had to dig about 5 inches down before they came across the remains of 13-year-old Carrie Jopic. And those remains were found buried in the backyard of Carrie's best friend and Carrie's best friend's older brother, 17-year-old John Mant, who obviously was the investigator's prime suspect. So you found the body in the backyard of your prime suspect. Case closed, right? Well, no, because John Mant still denied any involvement, and he actually seemed genuinely shocked that Carrie's remains were found in the backyard. And without any evidence, they let him go again. They were able to determine that Carrie Jopic had passed away from her neck being broken, but they couldn't determine anything else since her body had been buried for almost 2 years at that point. And only a couple days after her body was found, the investigators received a tip from one of her neighbors who witnessed something really odd the day after her body was discovered. This neighbor actually saw another teenage boy in the middle of the night, 16-year-old Jose Ferrara, crying at Carrie's burial site. He was crying, praying, and screaming, "I'm so sorry." Does it get any more suspicious than that? 16-year-old Jose Ferrara was also seen as a troublemaker. He was an outcast. He was a big partier. He was also allegedly dabbling into the occult at this point, and he only lived 2 houses down from the backyard that Carrie's body was buried at. When he was brought into questioning, he also denied any involvement. He said that him and Carrie were just friends, so he was obviously upset about her passing, and it made him extremely depressed. After the tragic discovery of Carrie's remains, Jose Ferrara befriended her entire family. He got very close to them, but especially her mother. He went over for dinner. He was there for family game nights. Jose cried with Carrie's mother. He mourned with her. He grieved with her. And they did that for over 30 years. They became lifelong friends. They had a lifelong bond after Carrie's passing. And as for Carrie and her murder, this is really going to upset you, but her murder went unsolved and cold for over 30 years. Until 33 years after Carrie Jopic was killed on October 11th, 2015, around 7 a.m., a call came into the local news station, and on the other end was a man who coldly and calmly said, "I'm ready to confess to a murder." And on the other line of that call was now the 50-year-old Jose Ferrara. He not only confessed to the news station, but he also called a crisis hotline and his estranged wife to confess to all of them that he had been the one to kill Carrie Jopic, and all of them contacted the police to report Jose's confession. When Jose was brought in by police, he was very polite, very cooperative. He made a full confession. He told them that the day that Carrie died, there was a party at Joe Mant's house, and he was there along with a bunch of older people, drinking and using substances. And Carrie had just gotten suspended. She was walking home, but she was nervous about being in trouble. She was trying to stall going home, and as she was walking home, she heard the music and all the noise coming from Joe Mant's house, so she just walked into the party. Her and Jose got to chatting. He offered her if she wanted to garden with him, and then after a little bit, he asked her if she wanted to go down to the basement with him and hook up. According to the 17-year-old Jose, the 13-year-old Carrie agreed to go to the basement to hook up with them, but as they started walking towards the staircase, she decided that maybe they shouldn't, and she actually said to him that she didn't think it was going to be a good idea. While the two of them are standing at the top of the staircase, Jose, who I guess didn't want to take the rejection or no for an answer, started to get really aggressive with the 13-year-old girl. He started screaming at her that they were going downstairs. He tried to push her to go down the stairs, and she actually fell down the stairs from Jose pushing her. And on her way down the stairs, Carrie Jopic broke her neck, which killed her instantly. Jose claims that he did not know that Carrie died right away. He thought that she just hit her head and it, knocked her unconscious. So in his own words, he decided to seize the opportunity and have his way with her. It wasn't until after he was finished that he realized that Carrie was not breathing. He says he panicked. So as the party is going on upstairs, he dragged Carrie Jopic's body into the backyard where he digged a shallow grave and buried her. And ever since that night, Jose claimed that the spirit of Carrie Jopic haunted him every single day for 30 years until he couldn't take it anymore and he had to confess. But even though he claims that her spirit was haunting him until he confessed, he then tried to plead not guilty during his trial, saying that the entire thing was an accident. And since the investigation was handled so poorly and so much time had passed, and since there was no physical evidence, they were not confident that they were going to be able to make a conviction stick. They actually offered him a plea deal. And the plea deal was 7 years in prison if Jose pled guilty to second-degree SA. Means he was never even officially charged in the death of Carrie, but he did agree to this. And he was released only 5 years later in 2022, which is just absolutely disgusting. That just horrifies me. He's out right now. He only had to serve 5 years and Carrie Jopic got a death sentence. From what I can see, Jose Ferrara is still living in Milwaukee and he has registered as an SA offender. My heart really goes out to Carrie Jopic's family and her friends. I'm happy that they have some kind of closure. Carrie got, some kind of justice. But, my thoughts really go with her mother, who blamed herself for 30 years for her daughter's death because she didn't go pick her daughter up. And she grieved and mourned with the man who took her daughter's life. Could you even begin to process that betrayal? I'm really, really interested to get your guys' thoughts on this case. I found it really, really interesting, and it's actually not the only case where a killer has believed that they're being haunted by the person that they killed. Definitely going to be scrolling through all of your guys' comments on this one. Do you think it's possible that Carrie's spirit was haunting Jose, driving him mad until he confessed? Or do you think that this was his way of dealing with his guilty conscience? Definitely let me know all your thoughts in the comments. While you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so, so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow with another video.
This is the story of Aiden Fuji. St. John County, Florida, May 9th, 2021, which was Mother's Day. 13-year-old Tristan Bailey was supposed to get up and make a Mother's Day breakfast with her sister. But when the mother got up and seen only the older sister up making breakfast, she asked her, "Where's Tristan?" And she said that she was still asleep. That's when she sent their brother up to wake her. But Tristan wasn't in her room or any other room of the house. This is when the family started to panic. At around 10 a.m., when they still haven't seen or heard from her, they decided to report her missing. Now, her parents told the police that they last seen her around midnight. But after questioning some of the teenagers in the neighborhood, Tristan was last seen around 1:15 a.m. at Durban Amenity Center, which was walking distance from her house. Word about Tristan's disappearance spread quickly through the neighborhood. It was all over the news. They had created posters. It was a search crew meeting up to search the surrounding areas. But at around 6 p.m., a man that lived in Tristan's neighborhood was about to go on his daily jog, and his wife told him to take a different direction this day. It's a child missing. They out looking for her. So help him out a little bit. And that's what he did. He took a different direction on his jog, and he ended up finding Tristan in a wooded area near a retention pond. She was found with all her belongings still on her or near her. What they did find at the edge of the pond was what they call a buck knife, but the tip was missing. It was later found lodged in Tristan's skull. She was stabbed 114 times. Half of those stab wounds were defense wounds, so she fought for her life. After checking Tristan's phone, it was clear that she had snuck out that night. One of her sisters said that she seen her on FaceTime with a boy right before she went to bed. But according to her phone, Tristan had snuck out and went to her friend and classmate Trey's house. Now, they both went to Patriot Oak Academy in St. Augustine, Florida. But over Trey's house was Aiden Fuji. Aiden also went to Patriot Oaks, but The two didn't know each other like that. Tristan knew of Aiden, and they had like one class together, but the two never talked. The next day on May 10th, the police went to go question Trey. Now, Trey didn't have no picture. I don't know if Trey is his full name, and I think it's because he was a minor. But when they went to go question Trey, Trey said yes. He called Tristan over his house. That was something that they did on a regular, I guess. She would go over there and hang out. But this time, Aiden was over there. Trey said he got sleepy at around 1 a.m. and told them, I'm about to go to bed. And he said Aiden and Tristan left. After the police got done questioning Trey, Trey called Aiden, asking him what happened last night. And Aiden said that he walked her to her street and they went their separate ways. And Trey said, well, they about to come and question you next. And his heart dropped a little bit. When the police asked what happened after him and Tristan left Trey's house, Aiden told one lie.
Willing to kind of give me a statement about what's going on?
Yeah, so we're at Trey's house, and I stayed there until probably like 1:50 a.m. And then I was really late to be home, so I just had to leave, or else my mom would like seriously just kill me.
And another one.
We started walking home, and then next to like where that brick wall starts up there,
Okay.
is where like she touched my and I like pushed her off me real hard, and then I just kind of walked away out of anger.
That's when the police decided to take Trey and Aiden down to the station for further questioning, because it was clear that they were the last ones to see her alive. While they were in the back of the police car, Aiden decided to snap a picture, I think this is Snapchat, saying, hey guys, has anybody seen Tristan lately? And he's holding up the peace sign. That is crazy, but that's not it. He also made a video.
We're having fun in a cop car.
Yep. Tristan.
What's up, guys?
Yep.
Tristan, if you walk out the damn...
When you see this in a month...
That's when the police took the boy's phone away, but that still did not stop this nuisance.
Hey Siri, text Dream Girl, they took my phone, I'm using Siri, and I love you, bye. Hey Siri, text Dream Girl, I can't see your text, the phone's in the front seat, I'm talking through the glass. Hey Siri, text Dream Girl, please stick with me through this.
That was his girlfriend he was talking to, and she was also called down to the police station for questioning, and she broke the case wide open. She said that Aiden talked frequently about wanting to kill someone and that he was going to do it within the month. The police asked her, when did he say this? And she had said just this month. She said that Aiden was obsessed with knives, and he carried two in particular, and he named them Picker and Poker. And with those knives, he would reenact like he was slashing her throat or trying to stab her with these knives. Even with doing all that, his girlfriend still didn't believe that he will actually kill somebody. During Aiden's interrogation, he's being informed that you're caught on the Ring cameras. Different angles all through the neighborhood. Around 1 a.m., you're walking with Tristan. At around 3 a.m., you're seen running back home with your shoes in your hand. Aiden's parents wanted to talk to him, so the detectives decided to step out, but everybody knows that these rooms are being recorded. But in this room, you can hear his mother trying to coerce him into saying that he had on khakis instead of blue jeans this day. And mind y'all, this is what he had on that day, clearly. Blue jeans.
You want khakis or blue jeans?
Blue jeans.
You sure it's not one of them? When we looked on the camera, you were wearing khakis, right?
Mm-hmm.
While his parents are in the interrogation room trying to coach him, the police are back at their house doing a search. And Aiden threw nothing away. They found his shirt, which had Tristan's blood on it. They found his shoes, which had her blood on it. They even found the blue jeans, but they were damp, wet. Why?
Discovered that Crystal went up to his room and located a pair of jeans in a hamper that she felt had blood on them. And then you see where she is taking them into a bathroom and clearly washing them in a sink.
Aiden was charged with second-degree murder and held at a juvenile detention center until they figured out if he was going to be charged as an adult. I don't know if I said his age, but he's 14 years old. In juvenile, he bragged about what he did to Tristan. On May 25th, his second-degree charge was changed to first-degree murder, and he was transferred to Duval County Jail. He pled not guilty to the first-degree murder charges, and he sat in solitary confinement for 400 days. Good Lord. He waived his rights for a speedy trial, but his trial kept getting pushed back. His first lawyer ended up quitting the case. It was around COVID. Everything was on Zoom. But one pre-trial hearing, Aiden decided to put on a little show.
What's going on? I don't want to let you demons. I don't want to let you demons take my soul. You demons will take my soul away. I don't let you demons steal my soul. I don't know what's going on. What I see you. What's going on? What you got going on? Why am I here? I just want to talk to my mom and dad. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?
Boy, Aiden later changed his plea to guilty in hopes to get leniency from the judge, but that did not work. On May 25th, 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of his case being reviewed after 25 years. They said that Aiden is a menace in jail, threatening to kill the guards, threatening to kill the inmates, extorting people commissary, using fear. He been pepper sprayed a few times, even had to be in the restraint chair a couple times. Leave him in there. But his mother, Crystal Smith, she ended up getting charged with tampering with evidence on June 1st, the year of the murder. She pled no contest in May of 2023 and was sentenced to 30 days in jail and 5 years probation. Would y'all help y'all son? And don't lie either.